What's up, everybody? Dr. Josh here, doctor of clinical psychology and instructor over at Marshall Psychiatry in Huntington, West Virginia. And today we're going to talk about the top 5 strategies, 5 of the top strategies that I see that sort of sabotage New Year's resolutions, and then 5 or so things to do about that to help combat that. So if you're interested in this or information around psychology and physique enhancement, to a lesser degree philosophy as well, like, subscribe. And also, this isn't a replacement for therapy. I am a therapist, not your therapist. But if you need assistance in that area, please go and seek additional services. With that all in mind, let's get to the episode. Of the top 5 things that I think really sabotage fitness resolutions, the number one thing that I can think of, these are also in no particular order, but number 1 is set unrealistic goals. I do not know how many times as a personal trainer, as a therapist, as an employee at a supplement store that will remain unnamed, I think we all know where, the formulation of unrealistic goals is the one thing that sets people back. Either they set a calorie deficit that is too grueling, they set a time frame or timetable that is too unrealistic, and then when they don't meet certain benchmarks, I have no idea where these benchmarks come from in people's heads, but when you don't meet the first or second benchmark, you begin to fall off the wagon. Certain habits and systems that maybe would have gotten into place with more moderate goals, more realistic goals, those things being in place, that people just fall off. And so setting unrealistic goals, things that aren't attainable in sort of the short or intermediary term without drastic consequences, like, for example, setting a calorie deficit that's entirely too large. Doing something like 1,000 calories under maintenance, that can be sustained for a certain amount of time, and then you need to pull out of that sort of a thing and begin to jump back, somewhere closer to maintenance. But if you start at 1,000 calorie deficit and then where do you go from there? I mean, I'm sure you still have some cardio you can introduce to lose the weight, but also your pool of calories to cut from is just so much more limited if you start very, very high. And if you started lower, at a 500 calorie deficit, reasonable, around 3,500 calories a week, losing anywhere from 0.5% to 1% of body weight a week, I mean, you're golden, you're good. Now, there's some instances for mini cutting, but they're called mini cutting because they don't last the entire length of a contest diet or of a dieting phase. So set realistic goals, make sure that they are realistic, entertaining, and flexible, and we'll get to that when we come to the solutions. Number 2, don't track your progress. This sort of goes hand in hand with setting unrealistic goals. I think more often than not, when I see people set unrealistic goals, they are also not tracking the progress. They're going off a feel. They're not tracking weight. They're not tracking their foods. They're making sort of these broad, sort of general changes, shifting from sort of that shift, that first thing you think of, shifting from whatever it is you're eating to like clean foods, shifting, which generally means just like whole foods based items. The fruits, vegetables, meats, grains, various things like that, from the sort of standard American diet. So there's one big shift, but at that point, that doesn't necessarily mean you're tracking calories or macros or anything like that. You just sort of make that big shift. And then, let's say you get to the gym consistently. There's one thing, that's great. You can track your sort of consistency at the gym. You're not tracking your progress in the gym. So you're not tracking what rep ranges you're in, how many repetitions you get for a particular weight. You're not tracking, you might even be going in and working out by feel. Maybe you do sort of a random assortment of total body workouts per week, which I think as a beginner, that can be effective, especially if you are enjoying the training and you're flexible in sort of your mindset. I think that can work for a while, but after a certain point, you're going to need to begin tracking things so that you can progressively sort of overload your workouts and make modifications that are meaningful. So if you're not tracking your calories, macronutrients, if you're not tracking your weight, which allows you to make adjustments, if you're not tracking your progress in the gym, what are you doing? What are you doing? I honestly, I don't know. I mean, sometimes. No, I can't say that I don't. I think it has been several years since I haven't tracked calories, macronutrients, body weight, and just my progress in the gym. If I had to pick three, I would pick those three, and that sort of gives you the data to make meaningful changes. So, tracking progress. Number 3, ignore the ending. Just go. So, I think this goes along with goal setting, but sort of ignoring where you want to get to, and under a certain time frame where you want to get to, and just going. I think that can be very motivating for people, just, beginning to move. And I think that's one of the hardest things is just getting up and doing, just do the thing. And so that's good. However, when we get up and do the thing, we might start at too high of an intensity. We might start at too low of an intensity. And then if we have sort of this outcome in mind, like, oh, I want to be ready by the summer, which I think that's a lot of people's goals. Like you endeavor on this in the context of this, like this new year, same you or new year, new you type deal. I think a lot of people think, ooh, I'm going to be ready for spring break, or ooh, I'm going to be ready for the summer. And in reality, you don't know what pace to go at because you haven't really mapped out a date. Like let's say we're in December, spring is what, roughly April. I don't know when some not holidays change. My goodness gracious, when seasons change. Let's say you want to be ready in April. To even look at that, I mean, that sort of outlines you've got, like, I don't know, 16 to 20 weeks when you need to get ready. Having that in mind goes, oh my goodness, if I have certain benchmarks for how much I want to lose per week and sort of an estimate of where I want to be body weight wise, that sort of gives me sort of a set of goals that I can achieve. But if you were to just ignore the ending and just sort of go, you really wouldn't know at what pace you need to be at to hit your goals on time. So ignoring the ending has many issues, one of which is also not anticipating stalls. Like if your goal is to be completely shredded by, let's say, spring break, and you just go at a breakneck pace, and then all of a sudden you stall, but your calories have gone from 3,000, just an estimate, to like already 1,500, and you're only 4 weeks in. I mean, I guess you could add in more cardio, but where are the rest of the calories going to come from for the last 12 or so weeks of the diet? Are you just going to keep cutting from that? That would be kind of unrealistic. That's already a fairly low number. And, so some athletes get much lower than that towards the butt end of a contest preparation diet. But like if you're just doing a sort of a New Year's transformation, in your first month, you're cut 1,000, 1,500 calories by the end of it in your first month, and your goal stretches out to 4 or 5 months. I don't know where you're going to go with that. So, and then back to the whole idea of the stalls thing, you will stall out. It's not going to be perfectly linear. Your trend line for your weight loss is going to go up and down, and hopefully the trend line is straight down, but you're going to have peaks and you're going to have little valleys that go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And then sometimes you're going to flatline for a little bit, and you might experience sort of these whooshes in weight loss. However, if you don't anticipate the stalls, you can get frustrated. If you don't keep the end in mind, it doesn't allow you to sort of backtrack and anticipate stalls. And so overall, these things can contribute to not so good. Similarly, with these sort of extended goals, like something you can't just achieve in a week, something you want to stretch out over months and weeks and weeks and weeks. If you sort of ignore the ending, you really don't anticipate that there's going to be fatigue buildup, and you could possibly get injured, and sort of building in extra time to take diet breaks whenever you're too fatigued, and you need that. I think that's a part of proper programming as well. So ignoring the ending, just go. That's a big issue too. And number 4, sort of the inverse of that. There's a number 4. Just focus on the outcome, or a particular outcome. So what I mean by this is just, so if your goal were to, let's say, win a bodybuilding show or something like that, and you were so focused on the particular outcome of winning said bodybuilding show, you would ignore sort of the habits and systems that you would need to get into place, and you would become very outcome focused. When we think of sort of these New Year's resolutions, what we all really want, I mean, we say we want to look like X, Y, and Z or get to a certain weight by a certain time, but what we really want is something that's sustainable. And so if you're too outcome focused, you're not going to focus on the habits and systems that you can develop, or that you should be developing, that will sustain you after you reach your goal. We have to keep in mind, like, look, yes, you hit the goal, but then there's everything after that. Your whole life isn't just going to be about this one particular goal. It's going to be about all the little goals after that and the larger goals after that. And so you have to plan for the goal. You have to plan the time frame before the goal, and you have to plan the time frame after the goal. So just focusing on a single outcome or particular outcome is going to be detrimental in that maybe you get there, maybe you do, but what happens after? So there's that. And number 5, the last thing that I think I've talked about throughout this is sort of just like changing willy-nilly, changing variables because you feel a certain way. It's not because you've tracked your calories, tracked your macros, tracked your weight, tracked your training, and you're modifying based on performance or other variables that you have quantified. It's because you feel a particular way. You drop all your carbs because you feel like going close to zero carb or shifting to keto or something like that is going to be some magically beneficial. And then you also, oddly enough, get reinforced for that if you have enough carbs and you've just dropped them off. You're like, oh, look at all this weight that I've lost. When in reality, you could have done a much more sort of moderate change if you had been tracking things and still experienced, weight loss within a decent range, within a decent range, 0.5% to 1%. But changing willy-nilly, it'll work for a time until you sort of hit the ceiling for all your changes. And so you hit that ceiling much sooner by changing willy-nilly, because I feel like the willy-nilly changes, they're sort of larger and they sort of impact everything. It's just like changing up your training to incorporate something like German volume training or something like that. Like, let's say you were tracking your training and you're getting, deeper into your dieting and into your training, and you just want to add more volume. And so instead of taking a look at your programming and seeing how many sets and reps you were doing for particular body parts, chest, back, shoulders, this, that, you jump immediately into something like German volume training and do like 10 sets of 10, which is kind of ridiculous because all your muscle groups are probably going to be different in the amount of volume that they can handle on a week-to-week basis. So to jump to this sort of cookie cutter sort of programming is sort of a willy-nilly change that doesn't respect fatigue, doesn't respect your own abilities, and it really just, in my opinion, doesn't allow you to control as many of the variables as you could be controlling. All right, so those are the 5 things that I think, in my opinion, I've seen really sort of sabotage some New Year's resolutions. Now, some of them are more insidious and they take a little bit longer. Some of them can be, sort of more acutely impactful. But here are some things that we can do to sort of combat those and make better New Year's resolutions. So, number 1, set realistic goals. So, the acronym I think a lot of people are familiar with is, SMART goals. SMART. Specific, measurable, adaptive, realistic, and timely. I like adaptive as opposed to attainable, just because realistic and attainable, sort of the same things. However, I would like to introduce you all to something that Eric Helms has coined, I believe. And if he's coining it from somebody else, well, then credit to that person. But instead of SMART goals, REF goals. You have to ref yourself. So realistic, enjoyable, and flexible. And I love this acronym, REF. The reason I love this acronym, one, because it's shorter than SMART goals, and it sort of encapsulates everything. Plus, it adds enjoyment, and it also adds flexibility. So holy shit, like in 3 little letters, REF, you sort of have made better the SMART sort of acronym for SMART goals. So with REF, So for a ref goal, you want to make it realistic. So, okay. So let's take in the context of a New Year's resolution goal. I think 4 months is a reasonable amount of time to lose a decent amount of body fat, put on some muscle, and make pretty dramatic changes to your body. That's pretty realistic. And let's say you've already been weight training for a little while, and so you're going to go into a calorie deficit. So you decide to lose 0.5% to 1% of body weight right off the bat. You set right around a 500 calorie deficit. You see where that goes. You make modifications off that. Maybe you chop off another 250 after a couple weeks, and you make small incremental changes from there. But your goal is to lose a certain percentage over the course of like 16 weeks. Very realistic. You're taking a moderate approach with your calorie cuts. You're monitoring your training, so it's very realistic. Now, enjoyable. Now, if you are the type of person who enjoys quantifying calories, quantifying your macros, tracking your training, if you enjoy having sort of a 4-month window, some people want it sooner. Some people can only really focus for 12 weeks. But if you enjoy sort of that longer time frame, if you enjoy the style of training, weight training you're undertaking, if you enjoy the foods you're eating, if you continue to do the things that you enjoy sort of around these goals, like socializing and maybe playing video games and reading and doing everything else, if you make sort of your goals, yes, realistic, but also enjoyable, and the things sort of around them enjoyable, you're going to be much more likely to meet those goals. And then flexible. This is probably my favorite letter in all of this, because I think, me as a therapist, I try and help people develop psychological flexibility. That's really all we're doing. We're really trying to get people to be more present and in the moment, trying to expand, cultivate willingness for difficult feelings that can't be modulated or can only be modulated some, can't completely get rid of. And then also to, pursue and create actions in their life that are sort of aligned with their values. So I really try and cultivate flexibility with my clients. And then, if I had to go back in time, when I was a personal trainer, I would absolutely try and build in like flexibility into goals, because let's just say you plan for 16 weeks and you plan for hitting 1% every week. The second you stall out, you're going to feel unmotivated, demotivated, however you want to say that. And you might want to quit. Also, like a random vacation might spring up, and you like, I can't do that. I'm dieting or this or that, and you miss out on things that you would enjoy when you could really just plan for things if you had just a little bit of time. So being flexible in your mentality and your approach to what you're doing really plays into the sustainability of these types of goals. So realistic, entertaining, and flexible is a very good way to set goals instead of making big, broad, unflexible, unrealistic goals. So ref yourself, realistic, entertaining, flexible. Number 2, instead of don't track progress, 80-20. I love the 80-20 principle. It's pick 20% of the things that get you 80% of the results. I think for anything, so we're talking New Year's resolutions, sort of body transformations, things like that, the things that I would begin to track. Morning scale weight, get up, use the restroom, get on your scale naked or in whatever conglomeration of clothing you always have on all the time, always, perfectly fine. Number 2, calories and macro intake. So, that does so many things. That'll make sure you're getting enough protein in. You can take a look and see how much fats you're getting in, carbohydrates, various things like that. And it's important to track these because this is what you'll be manipulating. Yes, you'll be manipulating training variables and cardio. However, the thing that contributes most to the fat loss is going to be your calorie intake. So why wouldn't you quantify that? My goodness gracious. And then similarly, back to the scale weight, if your scale weight's moving, you're probably not going to change anything if it's moving at the rate you want. So calories, scale weight, very important to track daily. And then weight training, just to see, honestly, are you progressing? Are you getting stronger? At a certain point, you may stall. Stalling in training, whenever you're cutting, it's pretty reasonable. So at a certain point, it's a battle to maintain strength and maintain gains, and you might even fall off a little if the deficit is deep enough and the diet is long enough. But that's okay. If you are tracking, you know for certain where your weights are at, where your reps are at, your rep strength, and so you'll know if you are falling off in those areas, and perhaps maybe you need to recover. You'll also, maybe this movement, if you're tracking your movements, maybe certain movements hurt your joints or connective tissues or things like that. So if you continue to track your track your weight training, that can give you valuable information to how you can modify and adjust that. So yeah, and then as far as like fancy shit goes, like I have one of those 8 sleep beds. Really, really cool. Gives me a bunch of information on how I sleep. I don't use any of it. I like it honestly because it lets me cool the bed down in the summers and heat it up in the winters, especially like right now. Our heat is out and it is crazy how cold you can let a room get as long as you have like a heated bed. It's really nice. 8 Sleep, not a sponsor. But yeah, so fancy shit and fancy trackers. I think a tracker that I would definitely invest in is a really cheap sort of whatever watch fancy tracker of your choice, doesn't matter, just as long as it tracks steps. I would just take a look and see what you average across a week. If you're averaging like 5,500 steps across a week, bump that up 7,500. See if you can do that. See if you can get that many steps in. And I think that will contribute to weight loss a great deal, and in a non sort of like, I got a cardio session planned. So cognitively, I mean, it will be much less burdensome than just planning cardio sessions, in my opinion, in my experience, and then continue to just over the course of weeks and months. I think if you continue to bump that up gradually every few weeks, on top of sort of making calorie adjustments, going up, 1,000 steps a day. So you went from 5,500 to 7,500, a couple weeks, maybe 85 to 9,000, get around 10,000. 10,000 seems to be sort of a magic number in the fitness world. And then also eventually I've seen people as high as like 12,000, but that's towards the end of a dieting phase when you're really just trying to get the last bits off. So that can be very powerful. So trackers, but yeah, don't really need anything fancy. Back to the whole ignoring the ending, just go. Instead of that, begin with the end in mind. This helps you predict obstacles. So as far as an obstacle that I've often thought of are the sort of social and communication skills that some of us, myself included, we lack whenever we are sort of outlining goals to our significant others. The ability to assertively communicate your goals to people who are important around you will drastically improve your chances of completing X, Y, and Z goal, because these people are seeing us change. And although some of these changes can be good, our changes impact the people around us sometimes. If we start buying particular foods, we're going to modify that sort of the kitchen environment. If we start weight training when we weren't weight training, or weight training more, that modifies our schedule, which could impact their schedule. If we start bringing certain, if we start packing our lunch and bringing it to work, our coworkers might have questions. And then our family and friends, if our friends like to go out like every Friday or Saturday night, you're going to need to be able to communicate to them what you're willing and not willing to do, why you're drinking water and not having the 4th, 5th, and 6th shot. Maybe you have the first 2, I don't know. But the ability to communicate your goals to family and friends and even coworkers is going to be important. So starting with the end in mind, you would be able to predict like, I haven't really, in the past when I've endeavored on any type of change, I haven't communicated effectively. So I should probably do that up front. So keeping the end in mind, you know that communication might be an obstacle. Stalls in training might be an obstacle. So if you feel like, if you're a person who already tracks weight training, you know that, whenever you're not in a calorie surplus, or if you begin cutting, you're not as strong at maintenance as you are in a bulk or in a calorie surplus. And you're certainly not as strong in a calorie deficit as you are at maintenance. So you begin to sort of anticipate stalls in training. You will know like, okay, I am 1,000 calories in the hole. I've been that way for a few weeks now. Strength's gone up a little, but I anticipate is going to stall here in the next few weeks. And that is something you can begin to anticipate, because that will happen necessarily whenever you get into a deep enough deficit. Now, maybe it doesn't happen for you if you're just dieting for 12 to 16 weeks. Maybe that's sort of the length that your body is used to. And that's perfectly fine. But some stalls in training, some stalls in weight will absolutely happen. And then also the last thing, being able to predict fatigue and injury. You're probably not going to want to, towards the end of any significant dieting phase, try and go for PRs on squats, benches, deadlifts, things like that. I think there would be some people who would disagree with me here, but if the whole function of what you're doing is trying to transform the look of your body, I would say maintaining your strength, absolutely, but shooting for absolute PRs when you have been in the hole with calories, I don't know how realistic that is. Someone could argue that different to me, and I might change my mind. But I believe that, maintenance of strength, not necessarily PRs on the butt end of a diet, are necessary. So you've got that. And just to move this on and speed this up a little bit, back to just focusing on the outcome, focus on just winning, focus on just the scale weight, focus on just a single event. Maybe get there, but then what? Diet doesn't stop when you hit the mark, if you want to stay sort of in the ballpark of where you've gotten to. So just remember, instead of focusing on the outcome, set your goal. Absolutely. Set a realistic goal, a ref goal, realistic, entertaining, and flexible. Something, 16 weeks of dieting to sort of transform your body for spring break. Absolutely, it's totally doable, depending on what your definitions of transform your body are. But also plan for time afterwards. Because I don't know how many times I've heard people say, got in really, really good shape. Then I went on spring break, crushed it, and then I just ate everything in the world. And back to square one. Maybe even worse. For some, the rebound is even harder if you don't have a plan in place. So don't just focus on the outcome. Focus several weeks past where you sort of set that goal, and develop sort of a reverse out strategy to help you get to where you're going. And we can go over that in future videos. And lastly, the whole changing willy-nilly thing. I think we sort of touch on not changing willy-nilly throughout this, but deliberate practice is something coined by Anders Ericsson, RIP, his book Peak. You should take a look at that if you're interested in sort of sport, mental performance, things like that. The things that I would do to help with this, number one, seek guidance from a coach. If you are endeavoring on, if your goal is like a bodybuilding competition, if your goal is just to, sort of transform your body, the best thing you could do for your sort of cognitive load is to just offload it to somebody else. Wouldn't that be magical? Just go get an app. You don't want to track your food on pencil and paper, go get MyFitnessPal, go get something like that. You don't want to track, some people still love writing in notebooks, but if you would rather get a good app, the RP Hypertrophy app, really enjoy that app as far as tracking my training and being able to sort of auto-regulate my training and just offload that so I don't have to think about it. Having my fatigue tracked for me, my PRs on certain lifts tracked for me, my volumes modulated for me based on performance. Holy shit, so much less cognitive load on my plate. RP Hypertrophy app, really enjoy that. And if you are endeavoring and you are getting an actual coach that you communicate with online, make sure you receive immediate feedback. Send them videos on your lifts and various things like that so you can get feedback there. Send them, talk with them about what you're doing diet-wise, what your fiber intake like, this and that. I'm sure if they're a good coach, they will ask a lot of these questions and just seek immediate feedback, because that'll sort of reinforce what you're doing a lot better than getting feedback sort of farther down the line. And then, just generally do tasks slightly beyond your ability. Don't jump into anything that is going to be immediately outside of your sort of zone of proximal development. So we have all the things that we're good at, and then sort of just outside that zone is called the zone of proximal development. And that is where we can sort of stretch ourselves just outside of our comfort zone and still hope to reasonably accomplish whatever it is we're doing. So maybe don't change all these at once. Maybe begin with maybe tracking your scale weight, tracking your macros, and tracking your training. Maybe that's all too much just at once. Maybe you just, for the first week, you start tracking the scale weight and you're like, oh, okay, this is what my body weight's doing. And maybe sort of that creates a shift in your dieting patterns. The next week you start tracking your calories. Awesome. You're like, oh, wow, I'm under eating on these days. And oh, look at the weekends. There it is. Severely. Well, that just wipes out everything there. So that sort of creates a modification for you there. And then you begin looking at your protein, carbs, and fats. And then you begin looking at your weight training. So where you are able to adapt, it's going to be different for everybody, but make small, impactful changes to the degree to which you feel like you can accomplish them. So, but that's it. The 5 things that I feel like sabotage most New Year's resolutions, New Year's transformations: setting unrealistic goals, don't track progress, ignore the ending, just go. Just focus, becoming very outcome focused, and changing willy-nilly. And the 5 things I think that can really help you sort of get out of those habits and set successful goals this new year. So I really hope and wish you all the best on your New Year's goals. And if you like the channel and you value things in the realm of psychology and physique, philosophy, psychology, and physique. That's what this channel is all about. The next episode I have coming up is going to be on the top 5 mental skills I use to sort of get shredded and, maintain some of that to a good degree. So that's coming up. And if you're ready, if you need a goal, if you're ready to commit, the OCB Mind Muscle Classic will be here in Huntington, West Virginia. It is a natural bodybuilding show, and I will be promoting that. It is on April 19th, 2025. And you can hit me up on Instagram at OCB Mind Muscle Classic. And you can go to the OCB website to sign up for the show. So I hope I will see some of you there. Other links and stuff in the description. And again, thank you for being here. And take what's useful and leave the rest. See you later.